Okay. This is the demo for Sprint 8 of the core preservation catalog work cycle. I've got a list of stuff here to go over. So I guess the first thing I'll talk about is we did a couple of significant bits of refactoring to kind of the like the heart of our catalog population wrangling code, the preserved object handler, um, and the two main things that we did. Let's see. Where we split the logging out into another class. We were a little more active record-like in kind of our error handling, and so we're not passing lists of things around so much anymore. And the other thing you'll notice is that this is kind of more on the model side, but we are using a Rails enumerated type with constants for tracking status of copies that are preserved on disk or in the future out in the cloud, because we thought that was semantically a little more sensible, would be a little bit more efficient, hopefully also. And we hope that those two things will make this, if you've been looking at the code, easier to maintain and easier to develop more features against. As this class gets bigger, we have more similar stuff. Let's see. Another thing that we did was just caching an object that we frequently look up, which is the default preservation policy, or at least its ID, so that we don't have to hit the database so many times to get that ID back, which changes very infrequently. We added some new features. You can now create and, populate and depopulate the catalog for specific endpoints using a canned rake task. We can just look quickly at the rake command in the README, which should make it easier for devs to stage data when testing, and also kind of provides us with a pattern that we can hopefully reuse when we're doing things like parallelizing. If we end up doing that, the crawling of storage routes for regular inventory activity. So let's see, we augmented the README with that info. Another thing we did was, I don't believe that this has gotten mentioned in a demo, maybe it has, but we added a database README, which just gives some advice for dealing with active record, kind of how to deal with transactions and exception handling, some links to some documentation, and some useful canned queries for getting a sense of the state of the catalog, that sort of thing. We have tagged and deployed our first tagged release of this preservation catalog code to production. You can see here some version 0.1.0 release notes, and you'll notice that tag, that git commit hash, the 9FFF, or 9FF, whatever, you will see in our release log from Capistrano on preservation catalog prod, that is our latest deployed release as of yesterday afternoon. And we are in the middle, probably in the first third, of what we hope will be our kind of final initial catalog population seeding run on production, which we will then use to continue to inventory the catalog. You can see here I've got some queries that I was running earlier to look at the state of things. Up here, this was a query that I ran a few minutes before starting the demo. You can see that it's all finished with storage route 2, which took about 17 hours and 12 minutes. If we looked at the stats from before, you can see that it took 17 hours and 20 minutes. So a very slight performance improvement. And that's one of the larger storage routes. I think that is the one that takes longest, it looks like, from the stats. We are into route 3 right now, by a couple hours. And if we kind of look at the state of the catalog so far, you'll notice that we have one invalid Moab. I think from before, if you go out and look at that on disk, it's got a version directory that is not compliant with our format. On that note, another thing that we did was work through some Moab validation questions. We noticed that a lot of our Moabs had subdirectories in the content directory, which we realized was actually not, I believe we determined that that did not actually contravene the Moab spec, but it's not conventional for us. So we added a feature flag that lets us use that criteria to mark a Moab as invalid or not. And we've collected the IDs of those objects. It turns out they all fall under, I believe, 1 or 2 collections, and hopefully we won't be adding much more, if any, stuff in that format. Kind of as you can see, we're continuing to collect basic performance info. I think we are done for now on the profiling. Maybe when we get to kind of more validation stuff, we'll do that. But for now, we're just sort of like looking at the basic stats for the run times for these seeding runs and such. Let's see, and I guess before I get to the outside work, we have started in a little bit, not as much as we would have liked, I think, on the Moab catalog existence check stuff. I think we had hoped to be done with that by the end of this sprint. But we have started thinking about how to fit the pieces together that we have. We actually wrote the ticket for that a few weeks ago, and it turns out that a lot of the building blocks are present from the seeding code, and I think we are hoping that it's a matter of kind of wiring that stuff up and getting it to run on a regular basis on multiple storage routes. And then we had a little bit of a distraction from some outside work. There was some kind of uncertainty over the copyright date that we were putting on ETD submissions. So there was a little bit of back and forth with that. And we also took some time to revisit the work that we had done on the workflow archiver job. Tony added the ability to have it check a lock file so that since it runs on a regular basis and moves a bunch of rows from one table to another, won't step on itself and just keep spawning new jobs if the prior job is taking a long time to run, which we hope will keep that from getting wedged so much and distracting us from preservation catalog work. I think that wraps up the demo for Sprint 8, and join us again for what I think will be the last demo of 2017, either next week or the week after. Thanks very much.